Good morning and welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast. We have some very special guests with us today, 3 generations of the Harpster family from Spruce Creek. Mr. Wayne Harpster, his son Abe Harpster, and Abe's son Logan Harpster, who is currently a sophomore at Tyrone Area High School. Wayne Harpster founded Evergreen Farms in 1965 after serving our country in the U.S. Navy. Over the years, Evergreen has expanded many times and today is one of the largest dairy farms in the area. Mr. Harpster's 3 sons, Abraham, Aaron, and Andrew, now run the family's diverse agriculture business in Spruce Creek. The Harpsters also own a cottage and fishing lodge on Spruce Creek, one of the best trout streams in Pennsylvania, which runs through their properties. Since the late 1970s, the Harpsters have hosted former U.S. President Jimmy Carter on numerous visits to Spruce Creek Valley to fly fish. Through a common interest in fly fishing and farming, they have forged a 40-year relationship with the former president, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient, and the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Since leaving the presidency in 1981, Carter has been one of the most active former presidents in American history, championing the causes of world peace, human rights, healthcare, the environment, democracy, and affordable housing in the United States and around the world. Carter is also a prolific author, writing over 50 books on topics ranging from fly fishing and world politics. Today, at 98 years of age, Carter is the oldest living president in American history. Carter has survived several serious health issues over the years, but on February 18th, it was announced that President Carter has decided to spend his remaining time at his home in Plains, Georgia, with his family and receive hospice care instead of additional medical intervention. When we heard the news, we thought it would be an appropriate time to gather local stories and recollections about President Carter and his connection to our area. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today to talk about your relationship with President Carter. Mr. Harpster, can you take us back to the beginning of your relationship with President Carter? Tell us how you first met.
Yes. President Carter was first invited to Spruce Creek by the Spruce Creek Rod and Gun Club member. I think it was Ken Sink from out in Indiana that was a member there. And I didn't know that he was coming till about a half hour before he got there. And the Secret Service stopped at the house, and I just come in the house just minutes before from milking cows in that morning. And this was in 1979, in May. And the night before, there was a big thunderstorm, and the stream was high and muddy. And they said that the president would like to meet me because I was the owner of the farm. And they asked if they could land the plane in a cornfield that was about 400 yards from our house, but not visible from our house. So I was confused because I didn't know anything about it. So I went down, and the forest department brought a fire truck in, and that was about the only person that was down there, except some local Secret Service. I think they come from Harpster or someplace in Pennsylvania. And then, so just before I left to go down, I thought, my goodness, there's a wire fence down there, a barbed wire fence. And we pastured our cattle down there at that time. And I thought, he won't have any way to get in out of the field to the stream unless he had to crawl over the barbed wire fence. And I thought, I'll cut the fence for him. So I got down there, and just within minutes, in come a helicopter in over the mountain, and it just dropped in like a crow would fly in and landed. They had orange spots marked for the helicopters in the cornfield. The corn was about 10 inches to 12 inches high. Next thing, the helicopter landed, and the door was open, and I jumped about 6 or 7 Secret Service, and they scattered. And that was kind of interesting. And next, almost immediately, another helicopter came in, and that's the one that the president and Rosalind, his wife, were in. And I was inside on the cornfield side, and they, as soon as they started out, I seen they had hip boots on and their fishing jackets and their rods in their hand. And that sort of impressed me a little bit. And so I walked halfway over to the helicopter, and he was coming. So we met about 20 yards from the field, from the barbed wire fence. And I shook his hand and Rosalind's hand, and immediately the president said, what kind of farming you do? And I said, we're dairy farmers. And he said, looking down at the field, he said, what kind of weeds are those? And I said, what they were. And he said, what's that one? And I said, what that one was. And then he said, what's this one over here? And I said, I don't know the name of that one. And so the next thing he said, let's go fishing. And I said, to get to the stream, I'll have to cut this barbed wire fence for you. And by this time, we're almost to the fence. And he absolutely said he doesn't want the fence cut. And I said, you better cut it. You might cut your boots or something. No, he said, we'll get across it. And I think that was the biggest impression that I had of President Carter at that time, or even to this day, that they crawled right over that barbed wire fence. Here's the President of the United States. There was 5 weeds, barbed wire fence, and a forest till he got to the creek. And I thought that's a little different than I have my impression of most politicians. Later that day, I got to thinking, I'll take him some flies down. And so I gathered up about 5 different flies and put them in separate boxes, plastic boxes, and put a bunch of other stuff in my fly vest, and it was puffed out. It could have been a bunch of hand grenades in there, because it looked like it was, I was a military with hand grenades, with all the fly boxes in there. And I walked from my house right down past probably 5 Secret Service. No one ever stopped me, never asked me a question. And all the time that I knew him, I never was questioned from a Secret Service about me or searched me or anything. But this was the first time. And I walked right down past to where the president was fishing. And I gave him the flies. And of course, we talked a little bit about fishing. And I said, it's tough today. And he said, well, we managed to catch a couple. And he said, I would like to have you bring your family down, and we'll take a picture before we leave. So, and about an hour later, my mother was still living, and I got a hold of her, and we all went down. We actually walked down, and we have a nice picture of my mother and all the kids. Not too long after that, they flew off. So now I didn't see President Carter till the next year, and he come back again. But meanwhile, I had a friend that was was a salesman for Fenwick fly rods, and he called on Fenwick from all around the East Coast. And I said to him, I said, his name was Lloyd Riss from Du Bois. And I said, Lloyd, I said, could you get me a rod made with President Carter's name on it? And I told him what I wanted in a fly rod. And so he did. I said, I think he'll probably be back. But I didn't invite him back, but I just had a thinking that he might come back the next year. And he did. And it was about a week later in May, and he came back and he landed in a different area on the club property. That's the Spruce Creek Rod and Guide property. And so about noontime, I stopped up at the club where they had the communication set up for the president, and I stopped and talked to one of the Secret Service there, and I said, ask the president, call down and ask the president if I could stop by and say hello to him. And they said, yeah. In a second or two, they said, yeah. So I drove down in my pickup, and of course at that time he knew I was coming, and so he'd come back off the stream and sat on a log there, and I sat on another log, dead log. Both of them was just laying there, and we started to talk, and then I give him that rod, and he was all happy because he just caught a nice 16-inch brown trout on the one of the flies that I gave him the year before. So we talked there for maybe 5 minutes or so. And I said, President Carter, I said, he said, you don't need to call me President Carter, you can call me Jimmy. No, I said, you're our president. I said, I'll call you President Carter, if that's all right. And I always called him President Carter, and I've known him for 44 years. And a lot of people called him Jimmy, but I just couldn't do that. Well, anyway, I said, would you leave here in the helicopters back to Camp David? I said, downstream about a mile. I said, I have a cottage in about a mile of trout stream, of the same stream. I said, if you ever wanted to come to Spruce Creek again and stay for a couple of days over a weekend or whatever, I said, I could make it available to you. So that was it. I left to go to work, and he went fishing again. So that was on a Saturday. On the following Thursday, I was in our hunting and fishing cabin, and I was cleaning some fish, and I had blood all over my hands and so forth, and a friend of mine was there, and the phone rang, and this was about, I'd say about 9 o'clock in the evening, because it was already dark. I said, hey Bob, I said, you answer that phone. So he went over and answered it, and we always had pranks between us all, and so you didn't ever know for sure. And all of a sudden he said, hey Harpster, my last name. He said, hey Harpster. He said, the President of the United States wants to talk to you. And I thought he was just pulling on me. And for about 30 seconds, I kept on including the fish, and then I thought, maybe it is him. So I hurried up and wiped my hands off quick, and went over and got on the phone, and we talked about 10 minutes on the phone. He said, eventually he said, I'd like to come up this weekend. And this was like Thursday. I said, when would you come up? He said, I come up tomorrow, Friday. I said, that'll be fine. I didn't have anybody staying there. So that's how our relationship really started. And there's so many stories in 44 years. I don't know how many you want to know, but there was a lot of different things. But the president, I cooked for him and Rosen and their family come, and we got to be the kids, their kids and our kids, or some of them were about the same age, and they become friends, and he would bring lots of different people from the White House and over the period of that summer. And I can't say how many times he come that summer, but he might have come 8 to 10 times in that number. And that's just one of the funny things that happened over the years. And President Carter liked to hunt also, and we hunted turkeys and we hunted ringnecks there on the farm and some checkers. And but one of the other things that impressed me, besides that early on, is when I would cook for him and Rosen and the family sometimes at my upper lodge, usually at lunchtime, they'd come in and he would be the first one done eating. And nobody said anything because the rest of us was all eating yet. And the president would get up and go to the sink and start washing dishes. No. He didn't want the wire fence cut. And he showed me that he wasn't afraid to get his hands wet either. And this not just happened one time, but it was almost every time that he would get up and do the dishes. And that's so over the years, I have a lot of guests come here, and you feed them, and it's just tradition that people get up and jump up, and because we usually do all the cooking and preparing the food and everything, and they just sit there. And here the President of the United States jumps up and did the dishes right away. Nobody said anything except we all noticed that. So when you meet somebody, there's always some way or something that impresses you about a person, whether what he does or how or she does. And he made two big impressions on me by his response to not cutting the wire fence and doing his share of the dinner by washing the dishes. And I would go with him fishing, and I would invite special people in, like George Harvey, which worked for the university, which was a famous fly tyer and instructor, and one of the people that started the fishing program in Penn State. And Joe Humphrey met him a couple of times, but George come a lot. And Lloyd Riss was another excellent fisherman, and he helped Rosa a lot to cast, and she became an excellent caster of fishing. And I would take him up in later in the month of May, upstream in the deeper part of the mountain area where the green drakes, which was a big fly that comes off, and the fish just loved them, and they usually hatched in the evening, and flew around in big groups of them, and the fish, of course, would be crazy about it, and we wouldn't leave up there. We'd have to crawl a couple fences, and we would walk out of there, and it was pitch dark, the weeds would be shoulder high. There's rattlesnakes up there and all kind of stuff. And it didn't bother him at all. And he was a real trooper. And so sometime in the middle of that year of 80, he invited us down to the White House to stay. So the whole family went, and we drove down and drove up to the White House, and of course they helped us with our luggage, and we slept in the White House and had dinner there that evening with the president, and then the next evening we went to the Kennedy Center, and they provided a van, and we visited many places in D.C. at the time, and that was something special. I had a lot of fun with the Carters, and I did a lot of, practical jokes and so forth. But it wasn't. So he lost the election, and one day, the next year, 81, I got this phone call. It was from him. He said, "We're going to China." He said, "It's 18 days in Japan." He said, "We also stop in Japan." He says, 18 days, you'll be gone. He said, "I would like you to go with us." I was just out of the deep blue. I was down building a calf barn at the time when I got the call. And I didn't even have a passport. And so then somebody else called me and I said, "You need a passport?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't have one." Well, they said, we'll set it up for you and tell you where to get it. You'll have to. So I had a friend of mine, John Cavridge, was a retired state trooper, and he was down, spent a lot of time down there with us. He didn't fish, and he didn't hunt, but he would just hang out with me and our family, and we were friends with their family. So he drove down with me, and I went in to get this passport, and so there was a place on there, a question said, what's your party affiliation? And I wrote down Republican. And they said, I didn't even know if they were going to give it to me. No. they said, "A Republican." Well, anyway, that was kind of a funny thing. So I went by myself. My wife didn't go to China. She wasn't invited. But anyway, so I met him in San Francisco, and there we flew from there to Japan, and then I didn't get off the plane there, but then we flew on to Beijing, and that was a great experience for a young guy. At that time, I would have been 42 years old, but anyway, I got to see every major thing in China. The Great Wall, we was on it, and he ran on it, and I ran on it a little bit. We saw the pyramids, we saw the digs, we saw the Forbidden City. We stayed there for, I think, 12 days. And so it was a great experience, and I took a lot of pictures. And so then we left there and went to Japan, to Osaka, and there they had I want to go back and talk to you about something about eating at China. They always, every evening they had big dinners for us, and big ice sculptures. But what the most fascinating thing was, I'm a left-hander, and they would set everybody for right-hand people. And as soon as they would set mine, I would move my forks and stuff over on the left side. And just almost like lightning, one of those Chinese waitresses would move much over back. As soon as they were gone, I'd move it back again. And just immediately, they come and set it back that way. Well, I learned that they didn't put up with left-handers in China. I mean, a kid that was a left-hander, they made him be a right-hander. There's no left-handers at that time anyway. And every major dinner we had, that was on, just like clockwork. I would always, it was got to be a game almost. Well, anyway, after seeing we left China, we went to Osaka, and there again we had a huge party and all kind of the best of food that they have, fishes and beef and so forth, and big ice sculptures. And so then we took the bullet train from there to Tokyo, and there we stayed another 2 or 3 nights. And one of the most interesting things we did there was get up before daylight and went down to the fish market. And that was unbelievable, the amount of fish that they had there. They had big tuna that was 300 and 400 pound land on the dock there, and they each one would have a number on them, and then they would pick the buyers would come in and bid on them. More fish than I ever seen in my life, and I mean, it was like an acre of a fish market. It might have been bigger than that, so we had a good time there, and of course then we come home. And then we went fishing all over the world. We went to Russia twice fishing. I was in Russia before fishing, so I knew where. There's an interesting story about that. We were in Mongolia fishing for tailmen. That lays next to Russia.
Mongolia,
yes. And so I was a little bit late getting in for the evening lunch. And we stayed in little egg rows, or so to speak. And it was a nice trip. Well, anyway, as I walked in, the rest of the group that always traveled with us, we had a bunch of fishing buddies, and they would come, the same people would come to our place lots of times with the president, and we fished. So we got to know a lot of people, most of them from Georgia, and wonderful people. And so when I walked in, they were talking about their next trip. And they wanted to go to Scotland. The women did, and they wanted to salmon fish for Atlantic salmon in Scotland. And I only got halfway across the floor, and President Carter said, "Hey, Wayne," he said, "if you was going to go Atlantic salmon fishing, where would you go?" I said, just without hesitation, because I was already been there. I said I'd go Pinoy, on the Pinoy River in Russia. And I got a lot of bad looks from the ladies there because they wanted to go to Scotland. But we went to Pinoy. That's where we went. And so that was just another interesting part of the story. Some of the trips we took, we went to Venezuela and went to Russia twice. He called me up one time after being up there fishing. He said, "Wayne," he said, "if you wanted to go someplace that you'd never been before. He said, where would you want to go? I said, I'd like to go to Argentina. He said, all right, we talked some more. So, in a day or two, I got another call from him. He said, we're going to go to Argentina. He said, my friend Ted Turner has a big property down there in the Patagonia. And he said, we'll fish for big brown trout. And so we went to Argentina. That was my first trip in Argentina. That was, if I'm right on that, that was 89. And so we went there and we had a good time. I didn't go down with him. I met him in Buenos Aires. My wife Marjorie and I was invited to, when he received the Nobel Peace Prize, and we went to Oslo to the presentation of that, and that was a wonderful trip, and to see him get it, well deserved too, for all the things he did for this country and people all over the world, and build houses, and he's just full of energy. President Carter, he was doing good things all the time.
What about you? What will you most remember about President Carter?
Basically how happy he was. Like every time you see him, he's always happy to see everybody. Always a big smile on his face whenever you meet him.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you guys. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this interview with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.